Hello and welcome to the 1895 podcast with me, Thomas D.
And me, Rob Cockerell.
And Rob, we've got a really exciting episode coming up today, don't we? Because we're going to be joined by Philippe Cornille of EIGA, aren't we?
We are indeed. And we crunched through a number of topics on this podcast, Tom, but none more important than safety and best practice.
Yeah, we'll no doubt get into safety and best practices and maybe pick his brains on a few specific areas of the industrial gases industry as well over the next, half an hour or more.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, we've had a couple of preview/review episodes, haven't we? Those bonus episodes recently. This is going to be, live in the studio though with our guest.
Yeah, and I can see him waiting on the line. So just before we let him into the room, Philippe's a great voice for this particular topic, isn't he? He's got a PhD in chemistry. He's served the industry for 3 decades now, and first industry at large on safety and environmental topics. Then he's later advocating on behalf of the chemical and gases industry in Belgium, and now he's indeed serving the European industrial and medical gases sector.
Yeah, and that is one of the key kind of offices of state, so to speak, that General Secretary of EIGA. Fantastic guest.
And with that, let's let Philippe into the room. Philippe, welcome to the 1895 podcast. Thank you for joining us today. My first question for you would be to reflect upon 2024 for EIGA and the developments that you saw throughout the year.
Okay. Well, 2024 was maybe a turbulent year. Generally, not specifically for the industrial gases sector alone, or not for the association EIGA alone. I mean, I'm Belgium-based, and we just now have a government after the July election, so it took some time. The Dutch are not so better off. The French have had some problems. The British have had lots of prime ministers over the last years. Germany is heading for elections in a couple of weeks. So there are turbulent times. In the industry itself, industry in Europe at large is challenged today. So there are some issues there. And as an association, we have to navigate these turbulent times. What have we done in 2024? We have had a winter summit in 2024, which was well attended, and we were very happy to see the interaction with the audience. We have also, for the first year ever in 2024, beefed up a little bit our advocacy work. We used to hide and work only for our main audience, our membership. So we prepared documents by our membership, with our membership, but also for our membership. And we see there's a need for the outside world also to find our documents. So we had to externalize somewhat. This is uncharted for us. So this is 2024 was the year that we have made our first steps. Not baby steps, but steps. But we're not there yet. So this will continue in 25, 26, and the years after. And then, this is no longer 24. A couple of weeks, just 2 weeks back, we had our 2025 Winter Summit. But this is for this year. So a change, particularly in the public affairs and the communication domain, on top of the classical activities that we have to capture best practices on the classical oxygen, nitrogen, pressure, piping, cylinders, you name it. That is what was new, the public affairs.
Sure, and we'll get into that Winter Summit shortly, won't we?
We will indeed. Fantastic to see the advocacy. We seem to be seeing a lot more of that coming from the industry's key associations. Philippe, I just thought I'd ask a question about the political change that you described across various countries. What kind of impact or challenges does that present for an organisation like EIGA? Is it the sheer uncertainty? Is it increased red tape? Is everything kind of on hold? What impact does it have for you?
It has an indirect impact because the prime impact is for our membership. So we try to assess as upfront as possible what the potential risks or impacts are, and then we try to inform the legislators of the undesired outcomes of the drafts that they have on the table. So it's not that EIGA directly is impacted, but our role is to be the forum for our industry where experts can meet, but equally the voice of the sector. So in this case, we try to be the voice of the sector, raising some concerns of legislations that could negatively impact our sector, even if that is not intended by the legislator.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I can imagine it's hard to build a rapport again with all these new governments and these new organizations coming in around the world as well.
Yes, our prime interlocutor, our prime speaking partner is Europe. So this means European Commission, European Parliament, and well, they have newly been established. So also there are we trying to get contacts and share our expertise, particularly on safety, inform them that we exist, because the most collateral damage that we have suffered is by legislation being drafted with all good intentions, but not with our sector in mind. And then suddenly we see this publication in the official European journal, and bang, there it is. Medical legislation being drafted with pills and syringes in mind, but not necessarily with heavy cylinders in mind. Bang, we suffer. Food protecting, the plant protection legislation having the glyphosates in mind, but not necessarily our ethylene for banana ripening. Bang, we suffer. Energy and climate regulations targeting larger industries, not necessarily thinking of our productions. Bang, we suffer, and I can go on. So the fact that EIGA or the industrial gases sector is too little known is also something that has driven us to externalize somewhat our communication to try to tackle that.
Absolutely, too long the invisible industry, really.
Yeah.
We would like to, well, it's a very nice tagline and I like it, the invisible industry, but we would like to change it into the visible industry. The invisible industry becoming somewhat more visible for the legislators in particular.
Absolutely, I've said for some time that needs to happen.
Yeah, you absolutely have. Philippe, a second ago you mentioned safety, so I'd like to stay on this train of thought for a little while, because EIGA is of course a safety-orientated organisation. It's the number one priority. So how are you addressing any of the current safety concerns in the IG sector?
Yes. There's the traditional activity that has been ongoing for decades, maybe I would even say a century. We celebrated our centennial anniversary a couple of years back. And that is the experts of our member companies gather within the EIGA environment and discuss topics. And from these top experts, we try to capture their brains and distill the information into our publications for the larger EIGA community to operate more safely. So that is one element. The second element on safety, traditionally as well, is how we discuss incidents. On a quarterly basis, the Safety Advisory Council discusses all incidents that have a learning in that. And it's actually nice to see when incidents are projected on the screen, experts get up, stick their nose to the screen because they want to know the very last detail of the incidents to better understand what's happened and to avoid reoccurrence of such incidents. So it just illustrates the safety focus that our experts are having. We also issue safety awards in our next summer session, end of May. We will have a safety awards dinner where about a dozen of awards will be awarded to our membership for exceptional performance on the safety, exceptional innovation in safety, and the likes. So all these elements demonstrate the typical activities that we have on safety. There's one activity that is somewhat new that we have tried to realize. We're still working on that. And that is externalize the expertise that we have on safety. We've seen with hydrogen, it used to be a business-to-business environment, and our industry standards were very apt and very appropriate to have a safe operation. But now, as hydrogen spreads, it spreads to non-business to business, business to consumer, business to the general public, and everybody's involved with hydrogen now. Now, I think we all agree that the only rollout on hydrogen will be a safe rollout, So how can we ensure that also the newcomers have safety on top of mind? Newcomers with brightest of ideas, very innovative applications, probably don't know that EIGA is existing. So for sure, they will not consult the EIGA library to find out good practices on hydrogen safety. So how can we help them out? Because we do have that knowledge, or our experts have that knowledge on hydrogen safety. So how can we disseminate this better to a broader audience? And that is something that we are trying to do. We have established an h2safety.info website, which combines hydrogen-only safety standards from not only EIGA, equally so the American CGA, or international organizations such as the International Standardization Organization, again, the ISO, or the European equivalent CEN. So that is one element, to make it somewhat more visible. We've also invested in e-learnings that are open to everybody, are freely available for not only oxygen, but also now hydrogen, and not only on how to avoid accidents, but even what if there would be a fire, what if there would be a leak, for responders, operators, drivers alike. So we are trying to expand our safety knowledge to the broader community than it used to be only the EIGA membership.
Such an important topic, isn't it? And it's great to see that harmonisation as well across different associations.
Absolutely. And as Philippe says, hydrogen is just one example. I'm sure that you could say similar of oxygen, of CO2, as that continues to develop and you see overlaps with other sectors such as biogas, just as an example. You need more and more of that visibility and that advocacy.
Yeah, you really do. And
that is a bit out of our comfort zone. That is visibility outside of the typical industrial gases community. And you're right that we have not only hydrogen but also oxygen e-learnings. These have been translated in a dozen of languages, but that we cannot do anymore for the hydrogen. And Tom, you mentioned harmonization. I like to pick in on that harmonization bit, because when we are speaking now about EIGA activities, but we try to work jointly with our American friends, the CGA, the Asian EIGA, the Japanese JIMCA, as much as possible for the documents that we prepare. So if there are no local restrictions, and I'm not speaking that a Fahrenheit or a Celsius or a PSI versus a bar, I'm not speaking of that, but there will be legislative differences. If not, we would try to harmonize as much as possible in what we call the International Harmonization Council, the IHC, to avoid overlap, to avoid gaps, to avoid contradicting elements in an American or European or an Asian standard. So, and try to be as efficient as possible with our members' resources being the expert that participate in this drafting. So this harmonization that you mentioned, it is not only with different sectors, it is within the industrial gases industry harmonized across the globe. And I think this is also a very important element that helps the visibility and that helps the uniformity and the credibility of a standard. It's just not an EIGA standard, it's a global standard.
Absolutely, and it's that collaboration, like you say, that will progress this industry forward, isn't it?
It is, and you were there, Tom. You've seen all the questions on the stage and the panels we have. People do ask about harmonisation. They do want to know how we can move forward together.
Yeah, it's important to be aligned, and we've seen that over the years. Philippe, I'd like to ask you about regulation now, and how has this progressed sort of over the last 12 months, and is there anything particularly important that you have seen?
Yes, that is a very important point. Let me say that in general, Europe is good in regulating, in issuing legislation. Let me take the energy and climate legislation as an example, because being a very energy intensive industry, this is very impactful for our industry. So the energy and climate legislation is top notch. It's very ambitious. And as I mentioned before, not always have our sector been considered when drafting these legislations. So that means that, we sometimes have worries. And the worries typically lie on the level playing field. that there is a level playing field, not only with intra-Europe, so domestic European versus non-European activities. There's also a level playing field concern for the intra-Europe production. Let me take the example of hydrogen. If hydrogen is produced as a standalone unit or as a unit embedded in where there's some captive activities, the legislation is different. And these are maybe undesired, unintentional, maybe just surprise elements that appear as this legislation gets more mature and mature. This is something we try to detect as soon as possible and inform the legislators of the undesired side effects that we sometimes see. It is the same for medical applications. I could take the example of oxygen produced from PSI in a hospital or via an ASU and the liquid oxygen delivered to the hospital. Very different legislations, but isn't the patient entitled to the same assurances of having the high quality oxygen that he or she deserves? These are the elements that we try to bring under the attention of the legislator. It's a challenge, I must say.
And Philippe, certainly is a challenge. I would like to touch on medical gases for a moment. You've teed us up perfectly for that. It's 5 years since COVID really kind of broke out and happened. For us here in the UK in mid-March, it would be 5 years since we were sent into lockdowns. What would you like to see when it comes to regulations and standards in medical gases or medical oxygen?
Okay, if you ask me, I would like some relaxation. I mean, during COVID times, we have that actually is a very good thing. During COVID times, both legislator, industry producing the oxygen, transport, hospitals, all work together to save patients' life. From the industrial gases sector, there were some relaxations on having, let me give an example, a hospital, a pharmacist, a diplomed pharmacist, having to release every oxygen badge before. And there were some relaxations. Drivers were relieved from the periodic trainings they have to do, just to make sure that the system continues working in these harsh COVID times. Now, what has been proven during these difficult COVID times? That there was no problem. I mean, having all this red tape has proved that without the red tape, it's equally safe. Everything is working. So somewhere I was hoping that having demonstrated for the duration of the COVID, that the red tape was just red tape, and that we could fall back to a more a system with somewhat less red tape. This has not been realized. So that is something I would have preferred. Quid non. Something else that I would like to see in the medical field is having the patient's safety at heart and having the same guarantees for quality, the point I mentioned earlier, between the different mode of productions of, in this case, the oxygen.
Fantastic. Great to understand that actual lessons learned.
Yeah, it's fantastic to see.
Maybe it's lessons learned, but I was somewhat negative. Let me also give you a positive example. Pre-COVID, there is the European Medicines Agency and other pharma organizations did not consider oxygen as a real medicine. This was all these bodies, they were reserved, access was only reserved for the real pharma boys and girls, not for the industrial gases sector. With COVID, it has become apparent that the drug that has saved most lives is our oxygen. And these doors have opened. So that is a positive element. Somewhat earlier, I mentioned trying to get our industrial and medical gases sector under attention. Well, I should not say this out loud, and it sounds very harsh, but COVID has helped bringing the sector under attention for the medical world. And suddenly, we are now at the core table, something that we have been pursuing pre-COVID in vain. So there now, when legislation is being drafted, we can only hope that also gases are considered when medical legislation is being drafted. And that is a positive element that we are now on the table and somewhat more involved in the drafting of medical legislation.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with that. And I mean, it's obvious, but I had never seen medical oxygen or medical gases looked at in that way prior to COVID. And it is, I think it's fantastic, it's recognised now, it is part of the public health architecture. It's critical. So yeah, absolutely, we need that seat at the table.
Yeah, all eyes really were on the IG industry then, maybe not quite so invisible then.
Well, not so invisible. And maybe a last element on this, on the medical oxygen. After COVID, Europe has decided, what are critical medicines? What are critical medicines and what system do we have to build around that to ensure that in difficult times we have access to these critical medicines? There was discussion, should oxygen be included in that list or not? Well, it was our point of view that the production of oxygen was not an issue at all. There was plenty of oxygen produced. There was some logistic challenges of bringing the oxygen in a safe way to the patient. That is a different story. But the product itself, in this case the oxygen, was at no risk of being depleted or the production interrupted. And that is something that the colleagues from the medical sector were able to discuss openly with the legislator, and the oxygen is now not considered as a critical medicine, just because it is abundantly available and we can continue producing even in a very difficult time, as we have proven in COVID. That's an example of how the interaction and the discussion between parties work very positively.
Absolutely, yes. It's great to get into these medical oxygen conversations, and like you say, even now, 5 years on from COVID, so really important. We've heard a few of the items on your wish list, I suppose, surrounding medical oxygen, but across the wider IG sector, what regulatory changes would you still like to see to maintain, like you said, that level playing field?
Yeah. We have identified in the energy and climate topic a concern. We have not voiced this yet, but there is a concern between insourcing and outsourcing, and the level playing field in all possible scenarios. That is a legislative concern that could have a far-stretching impact. In the case that we are discussing, it relates to the emission trading scheme, the European emission trading scheme, and the carbon border adjustment mechanisms. That there are some strange situation that create an unlevel playing field, and that is something that we would like to address the European Commission on.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Philippe.
Yeah, thank you, Philippe. Now, if we shake the topic up slightly, Philippe, you've served industry for 3 decades or more. The middle part of that.
Thank you for reminding on my age. Yes.
No problem. The middle part of that career, kind of advocating on behalf of the chemical and the gases industry in Belgium. So it seems logical to ask you about PFAS for a moment. We see a lot of conversations around this. It feels like it's kind of percolating in the background. Very few people are prepared to kind of come forward and say what they really think. But I mean, what would be your view on this? And if EIGA has a view, then EIGA's view on the impact potentially for this industry? Yeah,
it's a touchy question. Let me not try to dodge it, but let me try to share what I can share. The September 2023, so over a year ago, we submitted our comments officially to Europe. And this was that PFAS is crucial. PFAS, there's no alternative or safe alternatives for our applications. During the use phase, there's no risk of exposure to humans or the nature. There is at the end of life, it's only limited quantities. We are speaking of some Teflon, some valve seeds. We are speaking of some lubricants containing PFAS. not so much tonnages in quantities. We have submitted that, but we were not the only ones submitting comments. Over 5,000 comments have been logged into the European system. So European Commission and its agencies are now digging through these 5,000 comments, and they are doing this sector by sector. So they will cope one sector after the other. Our worry there is that our sector is not large enough to be considered an independent or a separate sector worthwhile the attention of the Commission for that. So that means that suddenly, for maybe the chemical sector, maybe the construction sector, conclusions will be drafted that will also impact our sector. But not having considered the cryogenic specificities or the oxygen cleanness specificities that are typical to our sector. Again, we are at risk of facing collateral damage for legislation being drafted that will impact us, but not having our sector in mind. So now we are trying to get Europe's attention on our specificities, because there's no quick fixes. If there had been easy solutions, they would already been in the open. So we are thinking maybe should we study jointly alternatives for PTFE material? It's an open question that is being debated internally within EIGA as we speak. Should we do something about the end of life at the waste phase of the products that contain PFAS material, being debated within EIGA as we speak? So I don't have a definite answer where it will lead to. I do know that we have reached out to producers, we have reached out to associations that supply our sector with PFAS containing material. But there's no straightforward solution to that. I know some of our members have investigated there too. So we're a bit in a difficult situation. And as EIGA, as association, we would like to prevent a ban of PFAS containing material on applications that are crucial for the safety in our sector. I think safety trumps environment when it comes to saving lives. That would be an undesired effect because legislators may not have our sector in mind. A big worry.
Sure, and it certainly brings us back to visibility and invisibility again. And Philippe, just finally on that point, what's your gut feeling on timeframes? Do you think this will all get held up in round after round of consultations and red tape, and our industry perhaps has a bit of time on its side?
Yeah. Yes, timing is unclear, and also the outcome is unclear. It's maybe more political than purely technical, where we are typically involved in. Why am I saying this more political? Because in the past, and I refer to my chemical background, substances were banned, and the reaction from typical green NGOs would be yes, but when a substance is banned, next day, industry comes with another substance that is equally dangerous. So what have we won? So it has been a kind of demonstration or a pilot idea to ban the PFAS. The PFAS is a family of substances covering thousands of substances. And now everybody realizes that this is maybe a bit over the edge because you actually impact very good applications that for which there are no alternatives. So how shall we solve this? It will be a political answer. When listening to the commissioners in their application speeches, you could see the answers. Yes, of course, we will be realistic and have alternative or exemptions for the PFAS. And in the same sentence, it was said, but we will not open that door very much. So it will be a kind of political balancing as well as it is looking for technical solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that, Philippe. On to your recently held Winter Summit 2025 now. One of our journalists was there on the ground, Anthony Wright, covering it. So Philippe, from your point of view, what are the big talking points? What are the big sessions there that you saw?
The topic was well, no surprise, safety, but driving safety digitally. So it was on digitalization and all the good this brings in our sector, but equally so, what digital risks are we introducing by this digitalization? And what I liked is that I saw many people taking notes, notes for their business environment, but also maybe notes on digital security, IT security, cyber security for personal use. Oh, that's a good idea, or this is a good idea. What I also liked is that we had somewhat more external speakers. When we speak next year, the topic will be on oxygen, and you could already anticipate that most of the speakers will come from the oxygen specialist, and you know who these experts are within our membership. Digital is somewhat different. Digital is all over the place. Everybody is facing with digital challenges. So I was happy to see non-industrial gases speakers taking the floor and sharing their insights and bringing these good practices into our industrial gases sector. So that is another topic that I appreciated a lot. We received a lot of positive comments, and yes, when my members are happy, it makes us happy as well.
Yeah, and it's great to get that outside perspective looking into the industry sometimes, isn't it? We've seen that at our events a few times, Rob, haven't we?
We have indeed, and I don't think, just generally as an industry, I don't think we talk enough about, well, exactly that, cybersecurity, the whole digital side of things. It felt like a buzz topic 5 or 6 years ago, maybe slightly longer. And then it's quietened down as other things have come to the fore. So it's fantastic that EIGA is putting the spotlight on that.
Yeah, it really is. Philippe, to carry on the theme of AI, digitalisation, the wider industry 5.0 development, where do you see the role that AI is going to play in safety in the industrial gases business?
In safety in industrial gases, let me refer to a wonderful Gasworld article on our event that we held a couple of weeks back. Basically, that was what the event was about. But if you were to ask that very same question to what the association or the AI impact on the association, we see some potential, but we're not there yet. We've tried several things. One of the elements we have is meetings, plenty of meetings, virtual meetings, in-person meetings. And there's a rotation system for taking the minutes of these meetings. We have a rotation system because if we ask for volunteers, everybody ducks away. So minuting is not the nicest of jobs. So if we could have our minuting simplified or already prepared a first draft by an AI agent, that would be nice. It may need some tweaks, that is fine, we could do that. Another element where I see a big potential is the search engine in our library. We have a library of documents where there's a search that is, let me say, a normal search. It's not the best of the best. We could improve that with AI. So we did an experiment with one of our members. We compiled all of that member's internal procedures together with all of our library, all on safety and technology. And then we questioned that internal AI because we want to have as a basic principle the data within EIGA, not spread out in the world, but within EIGA, and have done a search and AI tool working on those data which remain in the EIGA confinement. We did a search together with that member on the possibilities, and it looked very, very impressive. The point is, being specialist, and you look really at the answer, you realize that they are not reliable. So if the outside world would be questioning our library and getting seemingly reliable answer, but in reality not the exact answer, we cannot afford that. That is a no-go. So that the systems are not ready yet today. We did another element on versioning. If you have a new version of an EIGA publication, we have tracked changes to show the differences. There are different systems in place. We have a little table that shows the differences or summarizes the difference as compared to the previous version. But wouldn't it be nice that you could ask an AI system, particularly for large documents, the majority of documents are 10, 20, 30 pages, but we have documents 150 pages. So we sat in a working group that developed a 150-page long document And we asked AI to compare the new version that was established as compared to the old version. And again, it was so convincing what the AI produced as a comparison. And the first thing was really spot on. And the second thing, yes, well, we were lucky having all these experts at the table. Yes, it's half right. You get half a point for that answer. Eh? And then the real reason for making the change, for making the new version, was missing from the AI. So at first sight, super impressive and credible. But if you dig deeper, you would not bet your life on it. So that is why we are monitoring this and hoping that one day it would facilitate the association's life. One element where the 100% accuracy is less relevant is when it comes to minuting, because if 90 or 80% of the minutes are already pre-drafted, then, well, you win 80%. The human still has to look at it, but already there is a win. So that is something I see in the nearer future. The longer future will be when the AI systems are really reliable and that we can replace our existing search systems or comparison system or versioning tracking systems by AI.
Absolutely. I was about to use the exact same words about digging deeper. What's the phrase? A little bit of knowledge can be dangerous. That is exactly the case here.
And the AI technology is one that is constantly evolving and constantly developing as well. So it will be interesting if we had the same conversation in 12 months' time where we're at then.
Fast. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Talking of 12 months' time, looking towards the rest of this year, we're already a couple of months in, aren't we? But what other developments and what other projects can we expect from EIGA over the next, 10 months now?
Yep. Well, I have already hinted slightly to a few elements that are on our radar, and that is somewhat more advocacy, somewhat more external communication. We could hire a person dedicated to that, like just over 1 year ago, and this is now bearing its fruit. We are planning reach out to the new European Commission, to the commissioners. We are reaching out to the new members of European Parliament. I say members of Parliament or their staff or the experts, and these are things that we are doing now in order to prepare the advocacy that we intend on the files, basically the files that I have mentioned, whether it's on medical or energy and climate topics. These are the persons we will engage with and share our opinions on certain topics. So that is one big element. I would say one big new element. The classical elements remain, and the classical traditional safety discussions, technical discussions, all of that remains. And then you brought this up, the PFAS. That is also a topic that we would say, let's call it product policy, because we have two topics. The PFAS is one, and the other is the nitrous oxide. The classification of nitrous oxides is almost finished, and there's the discussion about abuse. So these elements, the product policy, PFAS and nitrous oxide. And then the third element we haven't touched yet is standardization. Standardization activities, because, let me elaborate slightly on that. We used to have our association library with industry standards. We have that, the colleagues in the different continents have that. But as applications or products like the hydrogen move into the public domain, it's international, the ISO standards that precede, because it's not only relating to our community, it is widespread. So our documents have no authority whatsoever to a user driving a hydrogen fuel cell car. So we need international standards. And who is drafting these standards? Well, about everybody. But shouldn't the persons, the experts that know the hydrogen and the safety be on the table as well? And that is exactly what we are trying to promote. Having our members, experts, sitting or participating in international standardization activities, having EIGA staff participating actively in these standardization activities as well. That is something we feel is a third objective for this year. So we have somewhat more additional topics, I would say, product policies, we have standardization activities, and we have public affairs activities that will define our 2025 years.
A busy year ahead, Philippe.
And I wanted,
yes.
And I wanted to ask about some specific gases. We haven't mentioned helium in this conversation. I'm conscious, obviously, we're allegedly comfortably in surplus in the helium market. Shortage 4.0 ended over a year ago. But does helium come up in your members' talks or concerns? Is it a concern in Europe?
It is. If it is a concern, it is typically not discussed within EIGA, being the Safety and Technical Association. We do not discuss markets, supplies, pricings. This is just a big no. So because the concerns may be rather on market than on technology, helium is not a topic within EIGA. CO2, on the other hand, is a rising topic within EIGA. CO2, typically, we have a food gases working group, and CO2 is tackled in their top expert. All of that is traditional activities, if I could call it like that. But CO2, when it comes to an emission, when it comes to carbon capture, doing the logistics about that, the conditioning, the transport, the storage, and the eventual sequestration or utilization or whatever, that is something new. And also there do we realize in this whole value chain of the carbon capture and then until utilization of sequestration, in this whole value chain, is our sector relevant or not? Well, we think it is. We think it is, again, for the same topics. Who masters the technology? Who masters the safety? Who knows how to handle CO2? Yeah, it's our membership again. So that is an activity that we are starting to beef up a little bit, not only as a product for food or other application, medical application, but also as in the context of the carbon capture discussion.
Invaluable to have that expertise within your grasps. Looking through 2025 again, what would you like to see from not only policymakers, as we've already discussed, but from your members as well?
From my members? Well, basically, I don't have to complain about my members. So from our membership, I couldn't expect anything more. You know what? Let me tease my membership slightly. If my membership would be somewhat more reactive when we have the industry standards or publications for approval, that would be appreciated. But this is just a minor thing. This is just to tease my members.
Well, you've thrown the gauntlet down there, yeah. Philippe. Final question to you to wrap up this conversation. You've maybe given us a message there, but if you had a message to the EIGA members and indeed the wider industry as well, what would your message to them be?
Well, that would be in line with our DNA. Eh? Please keep it safe. Keep it safe. And in doubt, please consult specialists, particularly when the examples I mentioned earlier, when it comes to hydrogen. If you're in doubt, even the slightest doubt, please reach out to our membership where the expertise is. So bottom line is keep it safe.
Fantastic. A great message. And with that, Philippe, thank you for joining us on the 1895 podcast. It's been great to pick your brains over the last, over half an hour.
Keeping it safe and keeping it real.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Pleasure is mine.
That's great to pick Philippe's brains there, wasn't it? And we got into so many topics, and that conversation went on for much longer than we anticipated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I made some notes there I've got 2 to 3 takeaways, if you like. One, I thought really resonated, the lessons learned on COVID, because it is 5 years on. We'll be running more on that at Gasworld in the weeks and months ahead. So it's great to learn about that relaxation of some of the red tape, and actually we need to stick with that if we can, or get back to that even. Secondly, harmonisation. We heard a lot about that in Abu Dhabi for our MENA conference. A lot of people talking about harmonisation. Great to get Philippe's view on that. And thirdly, AI and cybersecurity, that whole digital topic that so underpinned their Winter Summit this year. Yeah, I really resonated as well with what Philippe said about you could see everyone taking notes. I remember being at an annual conference of the British Compressed Gases Association, the BCGA, several years ago now. Must be 5 or 6 years ago, I would have said. And there was a cyber security expert in the room then giving a talk, and you wouldn't believe the things he could tell you about how vulnerable we all are as businesses and individuals. You know, how people can hack into your home Wi-Fi network without you knowing through one of those kind of kettles, you know, a digital kettle.
Smart kettle.
Yeah, that's it, smart kettle, or any other smart device. They can get into your network, and once they're in, that's pretty much it. You're vulnerable. So you wouldn't believe the amount of people making notes in the room when that was happening. So yeah, I can well believe what Philippe was saying there.
Yeah, it's a scary and fast-moving a threat, I suppose you would call it. And, you know, on that note, we referenced all the coverage of the Winter Summit 2025, and there is Gasworld's full coverage of that on gasworld.com, which
go and take a look.
Read. Yeah.
Go and dive into it.
But that's the end of this episode. We'll be back again next week for a fresh episode and maybe a fresh interview as well. But in the meantime, do be sure to like, follow and share the 1895 podcast.